So my name's Roderick Beard, and I'm the Managing Director of the UK Business Angel Association. Before I introduce on my very special guest, I will give a bit of background just on UKBAA, who we are and what we get up to. So in a nutshell, we are the trade body for angel and early stage investing. We look after about 200 members across the UK who deploy about £2 billion a year. Our role as a trade association fundamentally is to really help grow, build, scale the early stage investment landscape. So that's working with lots of angel groups, investment funds, equity platforms, really those who deploy capital across the board at early stages in the UK. And we help them by building better connectivity across the industry through events. We do about 75 events a year. We also run a free online investment platform for them. We also work around building better representation for our industry at government level. So making sure we're championing change and supporting key initiatives that need to happen to improve our industry. We also work around a lot around education as well. So building better awareness around what does great investing look like? You know, what does a great growth journey for a founder look like, and really helping investors to succeed. And it's one of the reasons why we organise the Friday Focus series as well today. So on that note, it is my great pleasure to welcome on our guest, Sunil Shah, CEO of O2H Ventures, and also UKBAA Angel of the Year award winner. And in fact, your title, because the awards have been delayed as well, so now your title has not yet been gone on to the next Angel of the Year kind of thing. So you're one of the longest.
Hold the crown for longer.
The longest serving Angel of the Year in ABAA's history. You and Ben Maria. So well done. How are
very
you?
Good.
Thank you for joining us.
Yep, I'm very well, thank you. Just kids are back to school as of yesterday, so it's been a whole hard reboot, hoo-ha, off the gaming, getting them back into the zone. So I'm completely shattered actually getting them out the door. I'm very glad they've gone back.
We're popping the champagne bottles a minute, they're out the door and they're back into school as well, quite frankly. I know I'm happy a lot happier.
I heard you were popping the champagne bottles last night. How did that go?
We did, thank you. Thanks, Sunil. Yes, we did have a UKBAA reunion. It's been a long time. We haven't seen each other in 6 months. We kind of all had a socially distanced outing in London last night, which, as these things do, tend to go off the rails. But anyway, that's all good fun. Thursday's new Friday, as they say. So look, Sunil, again, thank you for joining us. I mentioned already about your, Angel of the Year winner as well, but also you've got a fantastic background as a founder in biotechnologies as well. So, hey, look, why don't you share with the audience a little bit about how you got into the industry and a bit about your history and got into angel investing and so on.
Sure, yeah. So I'm a biochemist by training, and my first job was at PA Consulting. That was the only job I ever had. Came towards the end of that, and teamed up with my. At the end of that, I did an MBA at the Judge. Wrote a dissertation on virtual drug discovery. So I always had that interest in my younger years of virtualizing, how we can look at biotech. Sold my dissertation to 4 big pharma companies. Actually, paid off my MBA fees. And teamed up with Prashant, my brother, to do our first startup, which was actually in the tech space. And it's another story over beer, but it was called surpriseyourwoman.com. And it was an online gift site back in the heydays of boo.com and Last Minute and all those other things. We never made any money from it, but we made it a successful business in the end. And we moved it on. We then started a venture called Oxygen Healthcare. And back then there was a lot of chemistry going into India, but there's lots of problems around the project management and communication. We thought if we could improve that, we would, and it was through that business, which we started by remortgaging our house a second time, so proper entrepreneurial experience. We grew the business from a few people up to 175 chemists, 350 people, built new infrastructure in India, new research campus. Kind of long story, lots of learnings and stories along the way, but we sold that business to Piramal in 2011, and that was our first major exit. And after that, we wanted to be more innovation driven, so we started investing back into biotech and therapeutics. So we saw along that journey that a lot of the biotech companies were exiting for quite substantial amounts of money. We had that network really through pitching our service business to all the biotechs in Boston and the UK. We saw how they did it in the US, and we thought we could apply some of that thinking in the UK as well and invest alongside it. So that's how we sort of got into the investing space in biotech. It was through our networks and our service business into the area.
And like many great angels, you have also taken the path of forming a fund to give you basically give you more firepower in the work that you do. Tell us a bit about UKBAA and what you guys are up to.
Yeah, so as we were rebooting our business or restarting our second career really in investing, we learned that a few things. One is that a lot of the companies that we'd invested to at that early stage needed a space to stay, and the ones that were doing the best in our portfolio are the ones closest to us. So we actually acquired a site in Cambridge, which is very close to the AstraZeneca building, and we're developing an incubator site there. We restarted our discovery services company in India because we can really plug in capabilities into some of the startups in a way that's very beneficial for them to get going. So that business has now grown to around 300 people. And then we needed more firepower than the money that we had ourselves in biotech. And we actually enjoyed the investing side of it so much, we decided to set up a fund, Co2H Ventures. It's a fund that focuses on therapeutics. And so that's how we've got back into that space and in the game. So we've created this ecosystem that can support. I mainly run the investing side.
And you got an incubation centre kind of attached to an old mill. What was it? Was it a water mill in Cambridge?
It actually dates back to the Doomsday Book.
It
used to be like a trading post. There was a pub called The Ship. It's a really historic, it's an amazing site. There's 3 buildings on the site. One just had significant fire damage, but we're going to demolish that anyway, so it's not going to set us back very much. But the first building, which was the old bakery, should be live by the end of the year, and we'll have 2 biology labs in that, an office space, actual mill itself, and the third building will go through planning over the next few months, and hopefully we'll be able to develop and redevelop that site. And it's called the Mill Sci-Tech Park, very central Cambridge, and we're really excited about moving in. Actually, it's been quite a few years through it's had every issue under the sun. We've had a tree protection order. It's on the green belt. It's got 2 listed buildings, but it's an amazing, amazing site. We really feel privileged to be able to restore it.
No, that's amazing. That sounds like a really exciting part of, I guess, another chapter of the journey as well. I mean, and from I guess, biotech is a really interesting sector. It's always been a really strong performing sector from a UK perspective, from an investment perspective, in life sciences across the board. We've got some amazing universities pumping out some great IP. Couple that with actually a pretty grown up investment ecosystem creates actually some really great companies that have done incredibly well over the years. But it's not without its challenges. And in fact, I'm sure many people are interested in getting involved in biotech. So I thought it'd be really good to kind of dive in a little bit around how that kind of sector works from an investment perspective. What are some of the biggest kind of problems or pitfalls or even myths around that as well? So from a biotech perspective, and you're looking at all your kind of background, I think, one of the long things is one of the key things is quite a long gestational period from having an idea, developing the IP, getting it to some kind of commercial benefit. What are some of the other core challenges that you see around that sector in investing in biotech?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think before I go into the challenges, just set the landscape slightly of what's been happening in biotech in the last 10, 15 years. We've got the backdrop that the big pharma have been externalizing their innovation continuously. They've been focusing down on the R&D they do in-house and externalizing big chunks of it. So, they're moving more and more down the development pathway. So all the early stage research is generally done in academia, generally. The biotech innovation that happens quite close to some of those academic groups, which is why Cambridge is a hub, Oxford, Boston with MIT and Harvard there, San Francisco, etc. But that kind of trend for pharma to acquire, buy, or collaborate for early stage innovation is really driving that biotech landscape. And what happened in tech, 10, 20, over the last 20 years, is really happening in biotech. You've got very large blue chip pharma companies who actually, are looking to collaborate early with the innovative biotech companies. They feel that biotechs can be more efficient in the way they drive innovation, and they'd rather pay more money but acquire that science in at the right time for them. And that may be in, during the clinical trial phase. They've been going earlier and earlier, collaborating, supporting these biotechs with funding, with capabilities, with the knowledge that they have very early on, with sometimes non-dilutive money or kind of option deals to support the biotechs, with the view that they will acquire or provide milestones and royalties for the innovation as it progresses to a drug. Ultimately, pharma are around building developing new drugs for unmet needs. So biotechs, if they can be quite innovative in that space, the landscape is more competitive for the big pharma now, because they all really are after the best assets. So if you've got something good in the space, it's going to be competitive. You get a better price for it than you would have done previously, and pharma are now buying much earlier than they ever used to. That's the overall trends we're seeing. And with pharma closing down their R&D, they're being forced to acquire biotech innovation much earlier. So that's having a knock-on effect in terms of the valuations in biotech and what's going on there.
And
so
that's really interesting.
So if I break down the biotech sector into, probably quite interesting for the angel investors, is what stage do you get involved and how does the valuation landscape increase? So there is a huge amount of money. We'll come to the post-COVID stuff, I think, later on in the conversation, but there is a lot of money that's coming into the sector. But generally it comes into the sector, say, around a Series A. So the institutional funds, where they have the capabilities to really do the due diligence and assess an opportunity that's normally a little bit later, as a platform has been established or an asset is moving towards the clinic. They can do due diligence in a much more easier way, I would say, and apply modeling and risk factors to something. But at a very early stage, it's a very entrepreneurial experience in a way. You have to really get to know the team. You have to understand the science and the innovation. And there's a huge amount of due diligence work that needs to be done. And so that part of it, if you can take ideas very early and take them through that seed phase, that pre-seed seed phase, and establish them for, say, a Series A, you can go from the low single-digit million valuations, or a million or so, up to 10, 20 million fairly quickly in a way. So that's the space that we decided to play, and that's our knowledge, that's our networks, that's where we can add value. So we play in that pre-seed seed phase, where we do some deep dive due diligence into the innovation and try to build and support the teams into taking that to a Series A. I think that's a quite attractive area. Coming back to your original question, was where the challenges are in this space. Look, biotech does require huge amounts of money to develop a drug. Everyone knows that. However, to counter that, as I mentioned, pharma companies are coming in much, much earlier to collaborate with the biotechs, which does de-risk it significantly. And I can give an example of that. So we invested in a company called Exonate. Exonate span out the University of Nottingham.
They won one of our awards, actually, I think.
They won probably one of the awards. I'm chairman of the company, but they sort of headquartered in Cambridge, but all the wet lab work still is undertaken in Nottingham and in Dave Bates' lab. And they got a Wellcome Trust Award. They've been angel funded throughout. So it's a biotech company. It has no real institutional money in it. There's some sort of semi-institutions that are coming into it now, but they are very much angel backed. J&J or Janssen have done a deal with them to collaborate on the innovation. It's for a drug for macular degenerative disease, where AMD. Currently, injections of the eye there could be a drop, so it could be a game-changing technology. It's still very high risk because it's still very early, but Janssen are supporting the project through R&D funding, non-dilutive for the angel investors, and if successful, it will lead to fairly significant milestones and royalties. So the company may raise money now because they want to expand what they're doing into other areas and use their know-how around the technology into new drug targets. However, it doesn't need to raise any new funding for that particular project. So in a way, it should be a very angel-friendly deal, and a good example how you can overcome some of those challenges of large amounts of money into biotech. So I think that there are challenges. It's mainly the typical fears around the amount of money it requires, but that's counteracted by two areas: is that pharma are coming in much earlier, and I think it's now possible to exit on secondaries as well, which is becoming more frequent. So a Series B round, much higher valuation, the institutional investors may not want us small angel investors hanging around the cap table, and we might be quite happy to exit at that stage and say, okay, fine, if we get 10 times the money, whatever.
Because like in digital technology, and I'm sure you're very familiar with that as well, but a Series A is they're starting to hit £1 million revenue run rate. They've got 20% month-on-month growth rate. That's a kind of typical Series A. What does a Series A look like from a biotech company, from a business in therapeutics, for instance? Because from an angel perspective, that's when they can go, right, okay, pass the baton on to the next stage of
Yeah.
investor. And from someone less experienced in that industry, what would you say to them to be thinking that the company has to get to this stage in order for you to be able to stop writing checks?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. So in the biotech space, we invest into sort of three buckets. There's those traditional biotech therapeutics, which like Exonate and others, where you're developing a drug and you're taking the risk there's going to be no revenues for a long time, although there could be milestones and royalties. And so that's one bucket. The second bucket is those enablers. So there's service companies, they do actually generate revenues, like, for example, Metreon or others like that, QKind that we've invested into recently. They are revenue generating service companies that enable therapeutics. And there's ones which are sort of a newer sector, which is getting a lot of attention right now, which is sort of the AI and machine learning platforms for discovering new drugs. So each one I think is slightly different. So I'll start with the first one, which is probably where people think traditional, typical biotech, which is like the Oxford Drug Design or the Exonates of the world and such like, where they're developing a therapeutic with biologics or small molecules. A Series A for someone like that would look like, I would say, a big pharma collaboration like Janssen. I would say that Exonate could quite do a Series A right now. It could be a big award from a non-dilutive body, and they've advanced their program substantially towards the clinic.
Innovate UK, do you
Generally,
mean?
it's some. I'm sorry?
Like Innovate UK, or would you say, or would you?
Innovate UK or bigger. So they got a Carbex award, and it's that they're developing an antibiotic on back of a machine learning AI platform, but that's their main program. They're probably ready for a Series A. They have $11 million of non-dilutive funding going into the company. It's allowed them to advance the assets significantly. They're not in the clinic yet, but as you get towards the clinic, that's when you're thinking about Series A. I would say, because you need that funding to take it through clinical development, and you get some massive value hikes at that point. It could be establishing the platform. So if the biotech is driven by an AI and machine learning platform, it could be an established platform with 2 or 3 collaborators with big pharma. So they may not be owning the innovation, but there could be revenues coming off those collaborations. So it is a little bit mixed now. It's not as clear cut as it was earlier, clinical candidate, off you go. Because you've got AI machine learning coming into the picture. Those things are really hot, so if you have a good platform and you can show that you're going to ask a question, but yeah.
I'm going to dive. What do you mentioned about and talking about, setting the scene of the landscape, and biotech has been shifting and changing because of AI is having some, research itself is being changed. The way they can actually conduct trials and things is changing by technology coming in. I mean, what are you particularly, I guess, looking out for, excited by the kind of the cross section between biotech and digital?
Yeah, great question. So we like the space where you can use AI or machine learning to either validate new drug targets, because that's the holy grail for big pharma. There's no point in doing a huge amount of work on a drug target that's not validated. So if you go to a big pharma and say, we've got a well-validated target through this platform, whatever that platform is, whether it's AI, machine learning, AI or another, foremost have another platform for analyzing a target to see if it will end up being a druggable target, and if it'll end up being a drug. That, because you spend a huge amount of money, but if you can do a lot of that work up front using technology, whichever shape or form, I think that's the most valuable space for us where we play. The other spaces where you can find novel chemical matter for good drug targets, like PharmEnable do, or Oxford Drug Design, Atomica, for example, and it's getting a huge amount of traction in the technology space. So the tech investors, the typical tech investors, are very much looking at biotech if there's some kind of AI machine learning platform, and I think that's really bringing a lot of money into the sector for those companies.
We've got some questions coming in actually relevant to what you've been saying. You just a minute ago. Question from Charlotte Thompson at KTN. What R&D biotech non-dilute funding are you accessing in your portfolio? So you referenced 1 or 2. We've mentioned Innovate UK. What other?
We had Wellcome Trust Awards with one. Carbex is a good one for those, and it's Innovate UK. They're typically, Innovate UK is the typical one for our biotechs, which are which are UK based, and they can access that. Unfortunately, we can't access a lot of the larger grants in the US because we're UK based companies, and a lot of the Euro grants have kind of fizzled away. Yeah. So that our main go-to would be Innovate UK.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah.
We've got a question here from Stuart McDougall, talking around the exit piece as well, because you mentioned about, you know, secondaries, etc. How to engineer exits for angels when pharma is buying licenses from early stage biotech, and what stage is possible? So how do you engineer an exit if there's a license going in place? What sort of mechanisms do you guys put in place to ensure you can still get out, or are you happy to stay in?
Well, I'm one of those people who says don't overly engineer it. Do a great job on the science and the company, build a good team culture, and it will get engineered for you, and it'll probably end up being competitive. But if you have a licensing deal that you hope will be an exit, ultimately, if the science continues to progress and it looks like it could become a drug, a big pharma will say, rather than paying all those hundreds of millions of milestone payments which you've negotiated in royalty, we give you this much money now, will you accept it? Because they don't really want to pay all that huge money. The biotech would, quite frankly, rather have it all now and take an exit for its investors. So I think it's just about doing, you know, putting all your energy and brain power into building a great company, really thickening out the science to make it, to de-risk it as much as possible as an early stage. And then the pharma will, or the partner will probably come acquire you and buy you. The other exits, obviously, in the tech space are around the IPOs. I don't think we've got much of an IPO market in biotech in the UK. But I think the thing that has changed with Zoom and COVID is that we're now on a level playing field with the US biotechs. And before, to IPO and say NASDAQ, you'd have to make lots of trips to Wall Street, woo all the investors. But now you can do all that on Zoom. They're all being forced to use it. Even if you're in Boston and you have to go and see the bankers, you still have to do it via Zoom. So suddenly we're on a level playing field with a lot of the US biotechs. So I think NASDAQ will really open up for our biotech. So we're looking at that.
That's really interesting. Thank you for that. And coming back to the kind of more, you know, some of the challenges around that biotech funding piece as well. And one of the things that's been mentioned in the past is there's some great technical skill sets within in teams there, but also sometimes lacking some commercial skill sets. So from an O2H perspective, what do you guys do to help support and mitigate against that as well? Great scientific, great team, but actually starting to build these relationships with core commercial relationships, it can be a bit of a challenge. What are your thoughts on that, Sunil?
So the way we sort of get involved with these biotechs very early, we basically help in whichever, we fill in the gaps essentially. So sometimes the early stage biotech is very strong scientifically. We don't really need to do very much. Sometimes they're very strong commercially, then we can fill in the science. So we've created really an ecosystem to fill in the gaps. And I think that's, you know, the beauty of what we've sort of created in a way with the incubator, the plugin capability and the fund. We haven't got the big bucks, which, you know, some of the larger funds have, but sometimes you just need some money to get going. And, you know, then you sort of fill in the gaps and try to get to that Series A. So we have in-house scientific teams. We're a very, very early stage fund, so we're pre-seed and seed only really. And for a pre-seed or seed fund, we have very strong scientific capabilities to due diligence and support. And quite a breadth as well. So I think that's where we get involved. And we also have good connections to other investors. So often when O2H decides to invest, you know, we can introduce them to other investors who are like-minded, who appreciate our due diligence and probably come in alongside us as well. So whether it's finance, science, and when it comes to commercial relationships, we have live working relationships with a lot of the big pharma. Over the years, and so we can make introductions into big pharma, and even a lot of the due diligence we do is in, you know, we'll say when we look at some science, we'll say, look, that's great, if it works, will actually anyone buy it? Our customers are, say, Novartis and Pfizer and Merck. We may talk to them and say, look, this is the science, if we can progress this to this stage, you know, is this going to be interesting for you to collaborate or partner with in some shape or form? And they're quite open in saying, look, we will have a look at it. They'll do a deep dive or even a semi dive, say, look, it's a strategic area of interest. If they get to this with this stage, with this safety profile, we would be interested. And that allows us to help, even if we were going to make the investment anyway, direct to say, look, this is what the goals we need to achieve to be able to partner with them.
That is engineering the exit almost, isn't it? By going out and building these early stage relationships with really pharma with, and understanding that strategic goal from their perspective as well, to be able to kind of, you know, tick those boxes off.
I mean, ultimately, our customers are the big pharma. Ultimately,
yeah.
Because we're never. very unlikely we're going to take our biotechs and go to sales and marketing and start selling to hospitals.
Yeah.
It's a long, long trajectory. But if we can take it from a great idea, a great drug target, great innovation, and take it to a stage where we have something which is de-risked significantly, has created a bunch of data closer to the clinic or in the clinic, and then pharma will probably acquire a buyer, collaborate.
And actually, speaking around this collaborate, we had an interesting question coming in. Is there any collaboration agreement commitments with pharma that would put you off investing? Have you seen anything that you thought, well, actually, that's not as good as it could be? So whereby some kind of R&D, maybe they've done too much of a lock-in on exclusivity, or they're locking out too much.
That's just a negotiation there, and ultimately you have a choice to do the deal or not do the deal. So you negotiate the best deal you can, and then the board takes a collective decision whether you want, whether it's cheap.
I'm guessing it's rare that
we've had mid-sized
before you invest.
Yeah, I mean, we had, with Exonate, we had other partners that we were talking to, for example, and we decided to go with the Janssen deal, even though we had another option because it was a more favorable deal, et cetera, et cetera. So you just have to try to, like anything, whether it's tech, but it's business at the end of the day, you have to make it competitive to get what, something that's fair, really. If you don't make it competitive, it's always really difficult to get a fair deal.
And with from an angel investing perspective, you mentioned that there needs to be quite a bit of funding to get it to that first institutional round. If I was an angel investor interested in getting into the space, I mean, how would you go about it? What would you do first?
Well, I just chuck my money in and see what happens.
Yeah. Would you go,
but we've invested around 25 biotechs. We split our portfolio. So I think having a portfolio is very important, not just in biotech, but in any sector, really, because you've got, and then they sort of feed into each other quite nice as well. That one company can help another company now. One company can help you do diligence for another, introduce another company into pharma. So having a collective portfolio has been quite good. And we're very active with most of them. I think having, a spread across pure therapeutics or sort of different technologies in pure therapeutics, whether it's biologics, cell and gene therapy, small molecules. We're heavily small molecule focused because that's kind of our expertise, but we do invest in other areas. Having those which are service companies, which is a different business model, having that kind of AI tech. So we've kind of just diversified the portfolio from a risk perspective by having different business models that we invest into when we invest, and having a broad portfolio, I think, is important. I think it's, I wouldn't put all your money into one, and having a fund approach, which is thought was sensible to invest in a number of them, because some of them will fail. As any angel portfolio, you're going to get a number that will fail, a number that will do well. We try to obviously pick the ones through careful scientific due diligence and etc. to pick the winners and then support them. And
investing as a group is presumably pretty key, finding other investors to go alongside you, because it's very hard to write all the checks for one company, presumably, as well.
Yeah, unless you're a super angel, I think investing in a collective is we're part of Cambridge Angels as well. I invest collectively with that group in various businesses, and I think that that's been really helpful. And I learn a lot as well by investing alongside other angels, seeing how they do things and applying it to my own thinking as well.
Yeah, interesting. Had a question here from Tom Nichols. What are your thoughts on IPO as an exit route? You mentioned IPO, and it's a bit of a rare exit route at the moment these days, and has been for some time. What are your views on that? You mentioned about NASDAQ could be more interesting.
I think NASDAQ's the only place, one of the few places to IPO for a biotech. We are collaborating with various US biotech, and those which we've had a number of really successful IPOs in that space, in a number of biotech areas. So whether it's Morphix, Nello's company, which there's a whole bunch of them, and they're all going for around $1 billion. You could look at them; they're all around something like 750 million, $1 billion. There's some humongous exits in the biotech space on NASDAQ, so they can raise significant capital to advance their platform and their programs. We just can't get anywhere near that in the UK. There's several reasons for that, but I do really genuinely feel that having a US link into our biotechs is really important now. Trying to collaborate with Boston biotechs, and having board members from the US, having the best brains and the most experienced brains around wherever you are, and you can do that as a UK biotech now. I mean, it's a game changer. We're bringing on US board members into a number of our biotechs where possible, because you engage with that community, you open the doors in the US where you typically would have been very difficult. You know, in the old days, you'd say, right, our biotech is based in, I don't know, Oxford. Let's have all the best brains in Oxford around this rather than all the best brains around the world. All our board meetings are on Zoom now. Everyone's kind of got used to it. Why not have someone from 5-hour different time zone if it's the right brain, you know, or, you know, somewhere else in the world? It doesn't have to be the US. I think that's a game changer. So I do think NASDAQ open up for our biotechs in a way. You know, Bicycle very successfully IPO'd, and we had them on our Chai Time recently. There are a number of good examples of successful UK biotechs that have gone on NASDAQ. But it was probably a hard grind for them. But now I just think it's going to be a lot easier.
Tell us about Chai Time. You mentioned Chai Time as well. I've seen a few of them. They're really good. Do you want to tell the audience a bit more about what you're doing there?
Yeah, well, to engage our kind of ecosystem, as soon as the lockdown happened, we thought, right, we can't travel anywhere, but we need to keep engaged with all our partners around the world, our investor base, so all the different parts of what we do. We started a series of O2H Chai Times, and we engaged on different topics, whether it's you know, Prashant might chair one, my brother, on architecture and culture, because we're building 2 infrastructure projects around the world, and we've got experience in that. We've done it on cancer, we've done it on investing in an early stage, we've done AI and drug discovery is the next one in next Friday. We've got CEO Benevolent there chairing it. We sometimes invite guest chairs like Andy Richards and others. So we've created this, and we did it every week for the first 10. But it's actually a huge amount of effort bringing in that level of speakers. We had like the CEO of GE Healthcare on there. So we've tried to get on people who are right in the mix of it. But not only in the UK, they're very much global. We try to bring in people from the US, generally East Coast, because West Coast time zone doesn't really work. So we go East Coast, and we've had quite a good number of good reception. It's enabled us to engage in a lockdown period with potential acquirers. It's enabled our portfolio companies to link up with other panelists, which have been on there from Big Pharma. We had Janssen on there talking about the Exonate deal, for example. We had the global head of chemistry from Novartis on there, and we had the head of the judge. So we've had some very, very good speakers on there, or panelists, and it's a very relaxed thing. We just sit there with a chai. I'm often on there with a beer because it's on a Friday afternoon. And it's a bit of a
or in the morning as well, being locked down as well. I think beer o'clock getting earlier and earlier during lockdown, to be honest. I think it's
well, I've seen a few West people with beers at 9 o'clock in the morning on my chai time. Not having really, but no, it's a very relaxed thing, and but they've been very engaged in their learning.
And they're all online, aren't they? I think my colleague Gemma, if you could find post a link to where all those videos are, in fact, online on YouTube in the chat, but we'll also share it with those who
I mean, if you
follow email too.
Yeah, we record them all, and they go onto our YouTube channel. So if you Google YouTube and O2H Ventures, you'll see all our chai times there. There's probably about 15 or so now, 13, 15 or something.
We've got a question from a founder, actually. It's a bit of it's a well-trodden question, so it's not and it's always a challenge to answer. But the question is how to get starting capital. My experience is every investor is waiting to the first market data before they are sure about investment. There's an uncomfortable time gap in between. There's that kind of classic. What are your views about how to get that first bit? I mean, generally speaking, that's a friends and family round, which is great if you have wealthy friends and family who can invest in you. But it is a challenging giving advice for Daisy.
Yeah, I think it's that area that's where we invest. Actually, it's this pre-seed seed phase. It's really difficult. There's a huge wall of money coming into our space in biotech. I don't know if we're going to get time to talk about it, but post COVID-19, biotech funds have gone through the roof, but they're all kind of generally operating around the Series A space, and there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of million. Each fund, I open up my Fierce Biotech or whatever, I see a new fund with 400 million, 100 million, all going into therapeutics. But generally, they like to say when there's some traction, the team's being formed, it's a little bit further along. So this kind of pre-seed seed phase is very, very difficult. Yeah. And partly it's because most early stage funds, because they're very small, the fees are very small, and therefore they don't really have the confidence with their due diligence, whereas we have a broader capability around us. We can go in quite early and do significant due diligence around the tech. So I think that's where the problem is, that there's not the money at the pre-seed seed, and it's not that angels aren't willing to invest in biotech. It's just having that confidence and the ability to do the DD into early stage. And I don't just mean biotech, but I mean tech as well. But I think it's more pertinent to biotech in a way to do that DD. And I think that's the issue. It's incredibly hard. So You've got to, I would say, don't cold call investors. You've got to go through someone. Investors generally,
relationship.
it's relationship.
It
It's
points back
hard to meet people right now.
It points back to that need of a good lead angel, having someone kind of already on the books to help give confidence to other investors that this is something that's interesting. So one of the things that you could do, Dave, I'm not sure what sector that you're in, but you could, for instance, pay for LinkedIn Premium and find really interesting people within your industry and start asking for advice and invite them to your advisory board and start to build a relationship with them. If you ask for advice, you get money. If you ask for money, you get advice. So that's one of the things I could maybe have a look at doing, trying to find industry relevant people who might understand your product really well and start building a relationship with them to get that kind of verification from them, because that can help you to convince investors to part with cash, that you have that kind of.
And the other thing you could do is find commercial partners and start to get letters of interest. So there's no kind of commercial transaction, but you can show that, a commercial partner, a tech company or whatever, a big company, preferably a brand name company, is interested in your product. And it just starts to give investors, that confidence that this is a commercially tractable idea. It doesn't mean there's any transaction, but it does give confidence.
Yeah, okay. We're coming towards the end of our time. So if you want to post any final questions for Sunil, I'll happily pose them to him. But in the meantime, Sunil, what are you most excited about over the next maybe the next 12 months in the biotech industry? What are you really looking forward to seeing coming out? What are the big opportunities that you're seeing? I mean, you touched on a few of them already about, Zoom's leveling the playing field. That's really interesting. Lots of funds coming in now for more institutional Series A funding in the space. But what is it that you're particularly excited about or wanting to see come out or worried about?
Well, obviously, we all want to see the vaccine come out the other end from the sector, the biotech or pharma, and it's been.
They're doing well on that, aren't they? They're ahead of the game.
I mean, it's really nice to see the whole industry come together. Everyone's, often the industry gets a bad rap. The pharmaceuticals generally get a bad rap. But if one of my biotechs has got an idea, for example, AI Vivo did some modeling work around COVID-19. They came up with some constructs and potential repurposing of existing drugs for COVID. I emailed some big pharma heads of R&Ds. Literally, they all replied straight away saying, you need to talk to that person. Have you thought of that? There's been no kind of, we're just in it for the money or anything like that. It was very much, how can we be helpful? I think the pharma want to show that they, because they are genuinely, or at least in the people I interact with, they're really not good people. And I think they just want to do the right thing here. I don't think it's just about trying to create bags and bags of money. If they can help someone, they will, even if it's, competitive to a vaccine or product they're developing. I think that's been really good and nice. So I think the big game changer from our sector is if we can have a positive impact with COVID, it will really help our sector and bring more money into the sector as well. So I think that's the one big thing I want to see this year, is to see the big pharma and the biotechs be innovative and develop therapeutics and vaccines that will solve the immediate crisis. And apart from that, because of COVID-19, we're seeing, typical investors that maybe have 100% of their money in tech companies are saying, well, maybe I want 3% in biotech, 5% in biotech, 1% even. So I think that's why we're seeing more money coming into the sector as well. So that's quite exciting, that we can actually advance in this innovation rather than having to really get out of the begging bowl. People are coming to us with money to invest into good ideas in the sector, and they're forcing us to invest in a way. So I think that will push through early innovations in a number of areas, in not just COVID, but cancer, rare genetic disorders, diseases, inflammation. There's a huge number of diseases which are still we can still have an impact on.
Awesome. Well, look, Sunil, that's been a fantastic kind of overview of a big industry, a big opportunity. You've covered a lot of ground there for us in just 40 minutes. So thank you so very much for
really appreciate you asking me.
Your insights as well, and for joining us. So I think a round of applause from everyone, the virtual one, I'm sure, coming your way through Zoom as well. So thank you very much for your time and for joining us. I'm just gonna wrap up a little bit with some stuff about what's going on. So thank you so much, Sunil, for all of your time. And they'll be doing another chai time very soon as well. So do make sure you get involved in that when it comes to. So look, before you all head off for your Friday, we've got a couple of Friday Focus coming up as well. We've got quite a few more being planned, some great speakers lined up too. Next week, it's Beverly from who formed a brand new green tech fund. So we'll be hearing all about their kind of the road to net zero, how we're going to get there, and how investing is going to help support us get to that stage. We've also then after that, the week after that, on the 18th of September, we've got Rodney, who's all from Foresight, but also with Cornerstone Partners, all about how we can kind of increase investment into underrepresented groups, which is a really interesting theme, a really important theme, and one that we're actually touching on as part of London Tech Week. So next week, we've got some, in fact, on Monday, we've got a really cool talk. I've got Chris Adelsbach, Simon Blakey, Sarah Turner, legendary angels, all talking about how to be the successful angel investor, the do's, the don'ts, key strategies. So do feel free to join that. We're posting the links to that in the chat, but also we'll send that in a follow-up email too. So do feel free to come along. That's part of London Tech Week. We're also doing, being moderated by our very own Jenny Tooth. We got, again, talking around underrepresented founders and how we can help support that. Check Warner's on there, Andy A, and we'll be touching into things like the Investing in Women Code and some of the key initiatives that are coming up as well. So do feel free to join. That's 8th September at 11:30 a.m. again as part of London Tech Week. And also, before we all scurry off, getting ready for the weekend, I want to say a thank you to the community for the help in raising awareness about this Friday Focus session with Sunil. So a big thanks to Innovate UK, KTN, the RSC, who we're good friends with, Med City, O2H, of course, which is Sunil's venture arm, and also Unit DX as well. So thank you very much, guys, for helping support this and for raising awareness. And look, that's it from me. So on behalf of UKBAA, on behalf of Sunil and everyone else out there, have a lovely weekend, and hopefully we'll see you next Friday, or I'll see you on Monday for the London Tech Week talk.